Section 1. You're standing in your kitchen late at night, one hand on the counter, the other holding your phone like it weighs more than it should. You tell yourself you're just going to check one thing, maybe a message, maybe a quick scroll, and then you'll sleep. But then you see it, someone you know, someone who feels uncomfortably close to your age, your background, your level, posting a "we did it" photo. New house. New ring. New car. New job title. Smiling like life is effortless. And in your body, something tightens before you can even form a sentence about it. Here's the question that stings because it's honest. What if your jealousy isn't proof that you're a bad person, but proof that you've been letting other people's curated moments grade your life without your consent? And what if the real threat isn't that they're doing well, but that every time you scroll like this, you train your mind to feel behind even when you're making progress? The pain shows up in places you don't always connect to social media. You sit down to work and you can't lock in because a part of your attention is still replaying that post. You check your bank app or your credit card balance and feel a quiet drop in your stomach, like you're losing a race you never agreed to run. You look at your relationship or your dating life and suddenly it seems smaller, slower, less shiny than what you just saw. You start questioning your timeline, your taste, your pace, your worth. And the stake is simple but heavy. If nothing changes, you lose hours of focus every week, you lose sleep to late-night spirals, and you lose self-respect in tiny ways because you keep handing your mood to strangers and acquaintances who don't even know they're holding it. And it doesn't even feel dramatic at first. It feels like mild irritability. A dull pressure in your chest. A restless urge to keep scrolling, like the next post might fix the feeling the last post created. Then you realize you're not even enjoying anything. You're just comparing. Quietly. Constantly. You're watching other people's highlights and using them as evidence that your life is missing something, when the truth is you're looking at a much-edited slice of their story. By the end of this lesson, you're going to have a scroll routine that protects your mood instead of wrecking it. You're going to stop treating other people's perfect lives as a direct measurement of your life. And you're going to build a more grounded sense of self, one that doesn't rise and fall based on what someone else posted at 7:42 p.m. Educational content inspired by classical Stoic texts. Not medical, psychological, financial, or legal advice. If you want steady Stoic Focus lessons on emotional control, boundaries, and relationships every week, this is the channel for you. Stay with me until the very end, and while you're here, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Now let's get honest about what's actually happening in that moment when jealousy hits. You're not just seeing a photo. You're seeing a story your mind is writing around that photo. Your mind fills in blanks. They're happier than me. They're ahead of me. They're winning. I'm late. I'm behind. I'm not enough. That story feels real because it's fast and it's emotional, but it's still a story. The Stoics were blunt about this. Your distress usually comes from your interpretation, not from the raw facts. You don't suffer because someone posted a vacation photo. You suffer because your mind turned that photo into a verdict on you. And social media is a perfect machine for that because it shows extremes. It shows upgrades, announcements, highlight moments, and it rarely shows the quiet middle where most life happens. It rarely shows the boring Tuesday. The arguments. The uncertainty. The private doubt. The long stretches where growth is slow and invisible. So when your brain compares your full life, messy, unfinished, and real, to someone else's polished moment, it's not a fair comparison. It's like comparing your behind the scenes to their trailer and wondering why your life doesn't look like a movie. This is why you can be doing objectively fine and still feel bad after scrolling. You can be paying your bills, improving your skills, building something real, showing up for your people, and yet one post can make you feel like you're failing. That's not because you are failing. That's because your attention got pulled out of your lane, and once your attention leaves your lane, your peace leaves with it. So the point of this lesson is not delete every app or never feel envy again. That's not realistic, and it's not necessary. The point is control. The point is building a relationship with your attention where you decide what you consume and how you interpret it. The point is learning to notice jealousy without obeying it, and to return to your own path without needing to tear someone else down in your head. If you've ever found yourself doing something like this, scroll, feel bad, scroll more, feel worse, then you already know the loop. You already know how it ends. It ends with you tired, a little bitter, and less motivated to do the work that would actually make your life better. Because jealousy doesn't just hurt your feelings. It quietly steals your energy. It turns your focus outward. It makes you chase validation instead of building substance. It tempts you to rush your timeline, overspend to keep up, or make decisions for appearances instead of values. And here's another piece people don't say out loud: jealousy can distort your relationships. You start resenting friends for their wins. You start questioning your partner because someone else's relationship looks better. You start feeling embarrassed about your own life, so you share less, ask for less help, and isolate more. The cost isn't just mood. The cost is connection. The cost is the ability to enjoy your own life while you're living it. So today I'm going to give you something calmer than hype and stronger than willpower. This is about building a simple set of responses that work even when you're tired. Even when you're lonely. Even when you're stressed. Even when you're already feeling behind. Because that's when this hits hardest, when you're vulnerable and you reach for your phone like it's a comfort, and it hands you a comparison instead. First, we're going to break the spell of the highlight reel by changing how you interpret what you see, so your mind stops turning posts into personal verdicts. Next, you'll set a small boundary that creates space between you and the feed, so your nervous system has room to settle instead of staying on alert. Then, you'll learn one short sentence you can say to yourself right in the moment jealousy hits, so you can interrupt the spiral without pretending you don't feel anything. After that, we'll build a simple scroll routine, something you can actually do in real life, that keeps you in control even when the content is triggering. Finally, we'll tie it together into a grounded identity practice, so you're guided by your values and your pace, not by someone else's timeline. And here's the open loop I want you to hold on to. Later, we're going to walk through a Friday night moment where you're tired, you're alone with your phone, and you see a post that normally would ruin your mood for hours. And you'll watch yourself use these tools in real time so the night stays calm instead of turning into a spiral. Section 2. The first thing to change is not your feed, but the meaning you attach to what you see. When jealousy hits, the instruction is simple but uncomfortable: stop treating someone else's post as evidence about your life. If you never change this habit, every scroll quietly turns into a verdict, and your mood stays outsourced to other people's updates instead of anchored in your own direction. What's happening in that moment is fast and mostly invisible. Your brain doesn't pause to investigate. It jumps straight from image to interpretation. A promotion photo becomes, "I'm falling behind." A vacation post becomes, "I should be doing better financially." A smiling couple becomes, "My relationship isn't enough." None of those are facts. They are conclusions drawn at speed. And because they arrive wrapped in emotion, they feel convincing. If you don't interrupt that process, you end up reacting not to reality, but to a story your mind invented in half a second. This works because your brain is wired for shortcuts. It prefers a quick explanation over a careful one. Social media feeds that wiring perfectly. You're shown a polished outcome without context, and your mind fills in the blanks with whatever fear or insecurity is most available. You don't see the stress behind the promotion, the debt behind the vacation, and the arguments behind the smiling photo. You see a result, and your mind compares it to your current moment, not to their full journey. Over time, that habit trains you to experience other people's success as personal failure. There's also a deeper cost. When you constantly interpret other people's wins as your losses, you slowly disconnect from your own values. You start wanting things because they look impressive, not because they matter to you. You rush timelines that don't fit your life. You feel pressure to announce progress instead of enjoying it privately. A calmer, more focused version of you doesn't eliminate comparison entirely, but learns to see it for what it is, a mental reflex, not a command. The Stoics were clear on this point long before algorithms existed. As Epictetus points out in Enchiridion section 5, events themselves don't disturb us, our judgments about them do. A post is just pixels on a screen. The disturbance comes from the meaning you assign to it. When you change the meaning, you change the emotional impact. The exact line you're going to use is this: "This is their moment, not my measurement." Say it exactly like that. Not defensively. Not dismissively. Calmly, like you're stating a fact. This sentence doesn't deny their success, and it doesn't pretend you feel nothing. It simply draws a boundary between their story and your self-worth. Let's put this into a concrete, familiar scene. It's a weekday afternoon. You've been working for a few hours and you open Instagram during a short break, almost automatically. You see a former coworker announcing a big promotion. There's a smiling photo in a sleek office, a caption about hard work finally paying off, and a flood of congratulatory comments. The old reaction hits before you even finish reading. Your shoulders tense. Your jaw tightens. Your mind jumps to your own job, the parts you're frustrated with, the raise that hasn't happened yet. You feel a mix of envy and self-criticism. Maybe you scroll faster. Maybe you close the app. But the mood sticks. You go back to work distracted and a little bitter. Now the same moment, handled differently. You notice the first physical signal, the tight chest, the urge to compare. Instead of scrolling past or diving deeper, you pause. Just for a few seconds. You say to yourself, "This is their moment, not my measurement." You don't argue with the feeling. You don't tell yourself you're wrong for feeling it. You simply refuse to turn their post into a scorecard for your life. You remind yourself that you don't know the full context, and more importantly, that your progress isn't graded on their timeline. The post stays on the screen, but its emotional grip loosens. When you put the phone down, the heaviness doesn't follow you back to your desk. This matters because jealousy isn't just a feeling, it's a direction of attention. When you let it run unchecked, your attention moves outward. You start monitoring others instead of tending to your own work. Over time, that drains motivation. You work harder but feel less satisfied. You achieve things but barely register them because there's always someone else who seems further ahead. This single sentence helps you redirect attention back to where it belongs. Your tiny action for today is very specific and intentionally small. The next time you feel that first spike of jealousy while scrolling, don't scroll past it immediately and don't linger either. Pause for 5 seconds. Say the sentence once, slowly: "This is their moment, not my measurement." Then move on. That's it. You're not trying to eliminate jealousy. You're training your response to it. Let's slow this down together right now. Take a gentle breath in through your nose. Let it fill your chest. Then let it out slowly through your mouth. Do that again. As you breathe out, say the sentence silently in your mind. Notice if there's even a slight softening in your body when you don't pile more meaning onto the image. You might notice resistance. A part of you may say, "But what if I really am behind?" That thought is common, and it's understandable. But notice what the sentence does and doesn't do. It doesn't claim you're ahead. It doesn't claim you're behind. It simply refuses to let someone else's highlight reel be the judge. Honest self-evaluation has its place, but jealousy is not the right moment for it. When your nervous system is activated, clarity is low. This sentence buys you time so you can reflect later, calmly, on your own terms. There's another reason this works. When you separate other people's moments from your self-measurement, you make room for genuine appreciation. You can actually be happy for someone else without secretly resenting them. You can hold two truths at once: they're doing well, and your life is still valid and unfolding. Without this separation, admiration turns into self-attack, and connection quietly erodes. Over time, practicing this changes how the feed feels. It becomes information, not instruction. You still see success, beauty, progress, but it no longer feels like a demand that you speed up or feel ashamed. You stay in your lane. And staying in your lane is not about settling or lowering standards. It's about directing energy where it can actually help you. If you skip this step, everything else we talk about later will be harder. Boundaries won't hold if you're still interpreting every post as a judgment. Slow scrolling won't work if your mind is racing with comparison. This sentence is the foundation. It's simple, but it's not shallow. It protects your attention, your motivation, and your self-respect in moments where those things are most vulnerable. Keep this line close. We're going to stress test it later in a situation where the emotion is stronger and the temptation to spiral is higher. When that moment comes, you won't be inventing a new response. You'll be using one you've already practiced when the stakes were smaller. Section 3. The next shift is about distance. Not emotional distance from people you care about, and not pretending you don't live in a connected world, but structural distance between you and the feed. The instruction here is clear and practical. Stop letting unlimited access decide your emotional rhythm. If you don't change this, your nervous system never gets a real chance to settle, and jealousy keeps ambushing you when you're tired, bored, lonely, or overstimulated. Most people assume jealousy comes from what they see. But more often, it comes from when they see it. Late at night. First thing in the morning. In between tasks when your brain is already fragmented. When you're procrastinating. When you're emotionally raw. In those moments, your system is more open, more suggestible, and less defended. The same post that wouldn't bother you much at noon can feel devastating at 11:53 p.m. That's not insight about your life. That's fatigue plus exposure. Social media removes natural stopping points. There's no closing bell, no clear ending. You can always scroll one more post, check one more story, and see one more update. That design keeps your nervous system lightly activated all day long. And when your nervous system stays activated, comparison feels urgent and personal. You're not calmly evaluating your life. You're reacting. A calmer, more focused version of you doesn't rely on grit or moralizing to fix this. They design distance so fewer emotional landmines go off in the first place. This works because your body needs rhythm. Engagement and disengagement. Focus and rest. Input and quiet. When you scroll whenever there's a gap, your system never fully disengages. It's like leaving multiple browser tabs open in your mind all day. Nothing fully loads. Nothing fully closes. Eventually, you feel scattered, irritable, and oddly dissatisfied, even if nothing is wrong. Jealousy often rides on top of that state. It's a symptom of overload, not proof that you're broken. There's also a false belief hiding underneath constant access that if you don't check right now, you'll fall behind socially or miss something important. But notice how rarely that's true. Most updates can wait. What can't wait, but usually does get sacrificed, is your baseline calm. Unlimited access quietly trades your emotional stability for the illusion of staying in the loop. The exact line you're going to use with yourself is this: not now. I'll check later, on purpose. Say it neutrally. No drama. No inner argument. This isn't about forever. It's about timing. You're not denying yourself. You're choosing a better moment. Let's ground this in a realistic scene. It's early evening. You've eaten dinner and you sit down on the couch, telling yourself you'll relax for a few minutes. Your phone buzzes. You unlock it without thinking. One notification turns into a scroll. You see someone posting about an engagement. Another about a career win. Another about a weekend getaway. The old reaction starts quietly. A sense of restlessness. A vague dissatisfaction with your own evening. You scroll longer, half hoping the feeling will resolve itself, but it doesn't. By the time you put the phone down, you feel oddly wired and underwhelmed. You go to bed later than you planned, and your mind keeps replaying other people's lives. Now the same evening, handled differently. You feel the urge to unlock your phone, but instead of obeying it automatically, you pause. You say to yourself, not now. I'll check later, on purpose. You put the phone face down, or you leave it in another room for 20 minutes. The urge spikes for a moment. You feel a little restless. Then it fades. Nothing bad happens. Your body settles. When you eventually do check later, intentionally, not reflexively, the content lands differently. You're less raw, less reactive. The same posts don't hook into you as deeply because your system isn't already overloaded. This matters because unlimited access trains your nervous system to expect constant stimulation. And when stimulation drops, discomfort rises. You reach for your phone not because you need information, but because your system hasn't learned how to downshift. Creating distance retrains that rhythm. It teaches your body that it's safe to be offline for a while, and that safety is what reduces the intensity of comparison. Your tiny action for today is specific and measurable. Choose one daily window when you will not check social media at all. Just one. It might be the first 30 minutes after waking up. It might be the hour before bed. It might be during meals. Pick the window where you usually feel most vulnerable to comparison. During that window, when the urge to check hits, use the sentence, "Not now. I'll check later," on purpose. Then redirect your attention to something neutral and grounding. Make tea. Step outside. Stretch. Wash a dish. Sit and breathe. The point isn't productivity. The point is regulation. Let's slow this down together right now. Wherever you are, let your shoulders drop. Unclench your jaw. Take a slow breath in through your nose. Let it out a little longer than you breathed in. Do that again. As you breathe out, imagine creating a small buffer of space between you and your phone. Not a wall. Not a rule carved in stone. Just a buffer. Notice how your body responds to that idea. A common resistance that shows up here is, "But what if I miss something important?" That fear keeps people stuck in constant checking. But look at your actual experience. How often has missing an update for an hour truly harmed you? And how often has constant exposure harmed your mood, your sleep, or your focus? When you protect your most sensitive times of day, your baseline improves. And when your baseline improves, jealousy loses its edge. There's another subtle benefit to this distance that doesn't get talked about much. When you're not constantly consuming, you start hearing your own thoughts again. You remember what you were about to do. You notice what you actually want. You become more aware of your energy instead of numbing it. That's where grounded confidence comes from, not from seeing less success online, but from being less scattered inside. If you skip this step, everything else we talk about later becomes harder. Scripts won't land if your system is already overstimulated. Perspective won't stick if you're exhausted. Distance reduces the number of emotional fires you have to put out. It's a quiet form of self-respect, and it doesn't require willpower once it becomes a habit. This isn't about becoming rigid or anti-technology. It's about becoming deliberate. You decide when you engage, instead of letting the feed decide for you. And later, when the pressure is higher and the comparison feels more personal, this intentional delay will be one of the reasons you don't spiral. Section 4. The next skill is internal, and it's quieter than the last one. This is about what you do in the exact moment jealousy turns inward and starts talking to you. The instruction here is simple but powerful. Stop arguing with the feeling, and redirect the conversation you're having with yourself. If you don't change this, jealousy doesn't just pass through you, it becomes a voice that shapes how you see yourself for hours or even days. Here's what usually happens instead. You see a post. You feel the sting. And almost immediately, your inner dialogue kicks in. It might sound harsh, "I should be further along." Or subtle, "I guess I messed something up." Or comparative, "Why does it seem easier for everyone else?" You may not even notice these sentences clearly, but your body feels them. Your chest tightens. Your mood drops. You start replaying past decisions. This is where jealousy turns into self-judgment, and self-judgment is what really drains you. This matters because emotions don't live in isolation. They're fed by language. The words you use internally don't just describe how you feel, they amplify it. When jealousy is paired with self-criticism, it sticks. When it's paired with clarity, it passes. A calmer, more grounded version of you doesn't pretend jealousy isn't there. They simply refuse to let it turn into an attack on their character or worth. There's a common mistake people make here. They try to think positive or immediately counter jealousy with forced gratitude. That often backfires. Your system knows when you're being fake. The goal is not to overwrite the feeling with cheerfulness. The goal is to stop adding fuel to it. Neutrality is more powerful than positivity in these moments. The exact line you're going to use with yourself is this: "This feeling makes sense, and it doesn't get to decide anything." Say it exactly like that. The first half validates the emotion. The second half limits its authority. You're not suppressing jealousy. You're demoting it. Let's walk through a realistic scenario. It's mid-morning at work. You're between tasks and you open LinkedIn, telling yourself it's for a minute. You see a post from someone in your field announcing a big achievement. The old pattern kicks in fast. You feel that familiar drop in your stomach. Your mind starts listing reasons you haven't reached that level yet. You think about opportunities you didn't take, mistakes you made, time you feel you wasted. The feeling deepens because now it's not just jealousy, it's regret and self-blame. Now imagine handling the same moment differently. You notice the feeling as it arises. You don't rush to fix it or explain it away. You say quietly, "This feeling makes sense, and it doesn't get to decide anything." You let that sentence land. The jealousy doesn't vanish instantly, but it stops escalating. You're no longer piling judgment on top of it. Instead of spiraling into past decisions, you come back to the present task. The post loses its ability to hijack the next hour of your day. This works because your nervous system responds to permission. When you allow an emotion to exist without fighting it, your body relaxes. When you argue with it, it digs in. By acknowledging the feeling without letting it run the show, you shorten its lifespan. Your tiny action for today is to practice this sentence the first time jealousy shows up, even if it's mild. Especially if it's mild. Say it once. Don't repeat it 10 times. Don't analyze it. Just acknowledge and limit. Over time, this trains your system to recover faster instead of escalating. Let's slow this down together right now. Take a slow breath in. Let your shoulders soften as you breathe out. Imagine a recent moment when you felt a twinge of comparison. Don't relive the whole scene. Just notice the sensation. Now say the sentence in your mind: "This feeling makes sense, and it doesn't get to decide anything." Notice how different that feels from telling yourself you shouldn't feel this way. There's an important distinction here. Validating a feeling is not the same as agreeing with the story attached to it. You can acknowledge jealousy without believing the conclusions it's pushing. That separation is where emotional control lives. If you don't do this, jealousy quietly becomes identity shaping. You start labeling yourself as behind, unsuccessful, or unlucky. Those labels affect how you show up. You hesitate more. You take fewer risks. You speak less confidently. All because an emotion was allowed to define you instead of inform you. There's also a relational cost. When jealousy turns into self-judgment, it often leaks outward. You become irritable. You withdraw. You compare your partner or friends to others without meaning to. By stopping the internal attack early, you protect not just your mood, but your relationships. You might notice another form of resistance here: the belief that being hard on yourself is motivating. That if you don't let jealousy sting, you'll get complacent. But look at your experience honestly. Does self-criticism actually energize you, or does it drain you? Sustainable growth comes from clarity and direction, not from constant self-punishment. This sentence keeps you clear without crushing you. Over time, this practice builds emotional trust with yourself. You learn that when difficult feelings show up, you won't abandon yourself or turn against yourself. That trust makes you more resilient. You recover faster. You stay engaged with your life instead of checking out mentally. This skill pairs directly with the earlier ones. Distance reduces how often jealousy hits. Interpretation changes how it lands. And this internal sentence determines whether it turns into a spiral or a brief wave. Together, they shift your entire relationship with comparison. Hold on to this sentence. Later, when we walk through a higher stakes moment, you'll feel how much steadier it makes you. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. But it's one of the most important moves in learning to respond instead of react. Section 5. The next idea shifts your attention away from other people entirely and brings it back to something far more stabilizing, your own direction. The instruction here is this: stop letting comparison define success and anchor yourself to a few personal markers that actually matter to you. If you don't do this, even when jealousy fades, you'll still feel vaguely unsteady because you'll have no internal reference point for whether you're doing well. One of the hidden problems with social media is that it quietly replaces your values with metrics you never chose. Likes, announcements, visible milestones, external applause. When those become the default scoreboard, your sense of progress gets outsourced. You start feeling good only when your life looks impressive, and you start feeling bad when it doesn't, even if you're moving in a direction that actually fits you. That's how people end up successful on paper and empty inside. Jealousy thrives in that vacuum. When you don't have clear internal markers, your mind grabs whatever markers are most visible. Someone else's income. Someone else's relationship timeline. Someone else's lifestyle. Without grounding, you bounce between admiration and self-doubt depending on what you just saw. A more grounded version of you doesn't need to see less success around them. They need a clearer sense of what success means for them. This works because your nervous system relaxes when it knows what it's aiming for. Ambiguity creates anxiety. Clarity creates steadiness. When you define your own markers, comparison loses its grip because it's no longer relevant. Other people's paths stop feeling like threats and start feeling like neutral information. The exact line you're going to use with yourself is this: I'm measuring my life by my values, not by visibility. Say it slowly. This sentence shifts the frame. It reminds you that what matters most in your life may not be the most visible thing online. Let's put this into a real, familiar situation. It's a Sunday afternoon. You're scrolling casually and you see post after post of people showing productivity, travel, fitness progress, family moments, business wins. The old pattern kicks in. You start mentally tallying what you don't have or haven't done. Even if you were feeling okay 5 minutes ago, now there's a sense that you're wasting time or falling short. Now imagine handling that moment differently. Before scrolling further, you pause and you ask yourself one quiet question: what am I actually building right now? Not what looks impressive. Not what gets applause. What you're building. Maybe it's stability. Maybe it's skill. Maybe it's health. Maybe it's a calmer home. You say to yourself, I'm measuring my life by my values, not by visibility. The feed doesn't disappear, but its relevance shrinks. You're no longer comparing apples to oranges. You're checking in with your own compass. This matters because values-based markers are slower and quieter. They don't always produce dramatic posts. Consistency. Integrity. Learning. Repairing relationships. Saving gradually. Showing up when it's boring. These things rarely trend, but they compound. When you ignore them in favor of visible wins, you lose sight of the progress that actually sustains you. Your tiny action for today is simple but foundational. Choose 3 personal markers you care about right now. Not forever. Just this season. They should be behavioral, not comparative. For example, I work with focus for 90 minutes most weekdays. I move my body 4 times a week. I speak honestly in my closest relationships. Write them down somewhere private. These are not goals to show off. They're anchors. Let's slow this down together. Take a breath in. Let it out slowly. Bring to mind one area of your life where you've been quietly consistent, even if no one is applauding it. Sit with that for a moment. Then say the sentence, I'm measuring my life by my values, not by visibility. Notice how that lands differently in your body than comparison ever does. There's often resistance here. A part of you might think, but visible success still matters. And that's true. Visibility can open doors. Money matters. Recognition matters. This isn't about rejecting those things. It's about not letting them be the only source of self-respect. When visibility becomes the sole measure, your mood becomes fragile. When values are included, your confidence steadies. Another subtle shift happens when you do this. You become less reactive to other people's wins and more genuinely supportive. You don't need their success to fail for yours to count. You're not in competition because you're not measuring the same thing. That reduces resentment and increases connection. If you skip this step, even good coping strategies feel hollow. You can limit scrolling. You can interrupt jealousy. But without a clear internal yardstick, the question, am I doing enough, keeps coming back. Values answer that question in a way comparison never can. Over time, these markers become something you return to when doubt hits. You stop asking, how do I look, and start asking, am I aligned? That shift changes how you make decisions. You spend differently. You schedule differently. You say no more easily. You stop chasing things just because they're impressive and start investing in what actually makes your life work. This is where grounded self-respect comes from. Not from being ahead, but from being oriented. And when you're oriented, jealousy loses its ability to knock you off balance. It becomes just another signal that reminds you to check your compass instead of someone else's map. Section 6. The next layer is about pace. Specifically, the pace at which you consume other people's lives versus the pace at which your nervous system can actually process them. The instruction here is straightforward but countercultural. Stop scrolling at the speed of the algorithm and start scrolling at the speed of your body. If you don't change this, even with good boundaries and good self-talk, your system will stay overstimulated and comparison will keep slipping through the cracks. Most people scroll far faster than they realize. Thumb flicks. Rapid images. Quick captions. Before your mind has finished reacting to one post, the next one is already loading. That speed doesn't give your nervous system time to regulate. It stacks impressions back to back, and the emotional residue accumulates. One impressive post might be manageable. 10 in a row, processed at high speed, is not. Jealousy doesn't always come from a single comparison. Often it comes from saturation. This works because your nervous system doesn't distinguish between important stimulation and optional stimulation. Fast, constant input is fast, constant input. When there's no pause, your system stays slightly braced, slightly alert, and slightly tense. In that state, your mind looks for meaning quickly, and comparison is one of the fastest meanings available. A more regulated version of you doesn't just decide what to consume. They decide how fast to consume it. There's a common misunderstanding here. People think scrolling slowly means being overly intentional or turning social media into homework. That's not the point. The point is friction. Even small amounts of friction give your system a chance to reset between inputs. Without friction, everything blends together and your emotional reactions intensify. The exact line you're going to use internally is this: pause. Let this land before the next thing. Say it gently. This isn't about analyzing the post. It's about giving your body time to register it before moving on. Let's walk through a concrete scene. It's mid-afternoon. You're waiting for a meeting to start, phone in hand. You open a social app and start scrolling quickly. You see a fitness transformation. Swipe. A luxury purchase. Swipe. A happy family moment. Swipe. A career announcement. Swipe. You don't even consciously react to each one, but by the time the meeting starts, you feel oddly deflated and distracted. You can't point to a single trigger, but your mood is lower than it was 10 minutes ago. Now the same moment, handled differently. You open the app, but after the first post, you pause. Just for a breath. You say to yourself, pause. Let this land before the next thing. You notice what the post actually brings up, maybe admiration, maybe neutrality, maybe a twinge of envy. You let that sensation register, then fade a bit, before scrolling again. You still see multiple posts, but they don't pile up emotionally. When the meeting starts, your mind is clearer because you didn't overload it. This matters because speed is a hidden amplifier. When you slow the input, the emotional charge drops. You're no longer being hit by a rapid sequence of comparisons. You're encountering individual moments, each of which your system can process and release. Your tiny action for today is very specific. The next time you scroll, intentionally pause for one full breath every 3 to 5 posts. You don't need to count perfectly. Just create a pattern of stopping. During that pause, say the sentence once, pause. Let this land before the next thing. Then continue. Let's practice a version of this right now. Take a slow breath in. Let it out fully. Notice how even one deliberate breath changes your internal tempo. Now imagine scrolling with that same tempo instead of racing. Notice how different that feels in your body. There's often resistance here too. A part of you might say, this ruins the fun, or this is too slow. That reaction is information. It tells you how accustomed your system has become to high-speed input. Slowing down isn't meant to be pleasurable at first. It's meant to be regulated. Over time, your baseline adjusts, and what once felt boring starts to feel grounding. Another benefit of slower scrolling is discernment. When you're not rushing, you notice which content genuinely inspires you and which content quietly drains you. You start unfollowing or muting not out of anger, but out of clarity. You stop consuming things that consistently leave you feeling less than. That's not avoidance. That's curation. If you skip this step, comparison will keep slipping past your defenses. You can have the right mindset and still feel worn down if your system is flooded. Regulation isn't just cognitive. It's physiological. Slowing the pace gives your body the message that it's safe, and safety reduces the need to compare. There's also something important happening here with agency. When you control the speed, you're no longer being carried along by the feed. You're choosing how you engage. That choice alone restores a sense of control, which is one of the fastest antidotes to jealousy and helplessness. Over time, this practice changes how social media feels entirely. It becomes something you visit, not something that sweeps you away. You notice when you've had enough. You stop before you're depleted. And because you stop earlier, jealousy has fewer chances to take root. This slower pace pairs directly with everything you've learned so far. Distance decides when you engage. Interpretation decides what the post means. Self-talk decides whether the feeling escalates. Values decide what matters. Pace decides whether your system can keep up. When all of those work together, comparison loses its momentum. Keep this idea in mind. Later, when the emotional pressure is higher and the urge to scroll mindlessly is stronger, this simple act of slowing down will be one of the reasons you stay steady instead of spiraling. Section 7. The next shift is about what you do with the energy that jealousy creates. Because jealousy is not just a thought problem or a comparison problem. It's an energy spike. And if you don't give that energy somewhere constructive to go, it turns inward as rumination or outward as resentment. The instruction here is this: convert jealousy into a small, self-directed action instead of letting it circulate in your head. If you don't do this, even when jealousy fades emotionally, it leaves behind a residue of restlessness and dissatisfaction. Here's what most people miss. Jealousy often contains information. Not information about what's wrong with you, but information about what you care about. When you feel a sharp comparison, it usually points to a desire for growth, security, recognition, freedom, or connection. The problem is not that desire exists. The problem is that it gets stuck in observation mode. You keep watching other people live out versions of what you want, and your own body stays inactive. That mismatch between desire and action is what creates frustration. This works because your nervous system wants completion. When an impulse has no outlet, it loops. When it's given even a small outlet, it settles. A calmer, more focused version of you doesn't shame jealousy or indulge it. They translate it. They ask, what is this pointing me toward? And then they move, even slightly, in that direction. There's a trap here that's important to avoid. People often turn jealousy into pressure. If they can do it, I should be doing more. That leads to overworking, rushing, and burnout. That's not what we're doing. We're not using jealousy as a whip. We're using it as a compass. The movement is small, humane, sustainable. The exact line you're going to use with yourself is this: what's one small step in my lane? Say it gently. This question redirects attention without creating urgency. It pulls you out of observation and back into authorship. Let's walk through a concrete scene. It's a weekday evening. You're scrolling after work and you see someone posting about a creative project they launched. The old reaction shows up. A mix of admiration and envy. You think about the project you've been talking about starting for months. You feel a twinge of shame for not moving faster. In the past, this is where you might spiral, scroll more, or close the app feeling deflated. Now imagine responding differently. You notice the jealousy. You don't analyze it to death. You ask yourself, what's one small step in my lane? Not how do I catch up? Not why am I behind? Just one step. Maybe it's opening a document and writing one paragraph. Maybe it's sending one email. Maybe it's blocking 20 minutes on your calendar for tomorrow. You take that step, however small. The jealousy doesn't need to disappear completely. But it transforms. It turns into momentum instead of pressure. This matters because action grounds you. It reminds your nervous system that you are not powerless or stuck. You're in motion. Even tiny motion changes how comparison feels. Other people's progress stops feeling like an accusation and starts feeling like information. You're no longer just consuming success. You're participating in your own growth. Your tiny action for today is specific. The next time jealousy hits and lingers for more than a few seconds, ask the question, what's one small step in my lane? Then do the smallest reasonable version of that step within 24 hours. Not the ideal version. The smallest version. 5 minutes. One message. One outline. One decision. That's enough. Let's slow this down together. Take a breath in. Let it out slowly. Bring to mind a recent moment when you felt jealous online. Don't judge it. Just notice what it was pointing toward. Now, quietly ask yourself the question, what's one small step in my lane? Let the answer be simple. Almost unimpressive. That's the right size. A common resistance here is the thought, this isn't enough. That voice wants dramatic progress to erase discomfort. But dramatic moves aren't what build stability. Small, repeated steps do. When you honor that, you stop oscillating between envy and exhaustion. There's another benefit to this practice that's easy to miss. When you consistently respond to jealousy with self-directed action, your trust in yourself increases. You learn that when uncomfortable feelings arise, you will do something constructive instead of spiraling or numbing. That trust is deeply regulating. It makes future jealousy less threatening because you know how you'll handle it. This also changes how you relate to other people's success. You don't need to downplay it or distance yourself from it. You can appreciate it while staying engaged with your own path. That's a sign of maturity, not indifference. If you don't do this, jealousy tends to turn into passive comparison. You keep watching. You keep thinking. But you don't move. Over time, that erodes confidence. You start believing you're the kind of person who notices and wishes, but doesn't act. This practice gently rewrites that identity. It's important to say this clearly, the goal is not to become hyperproductive or to constantly respond to jealousy with work. Rest is still valid. Slowness is still valid. The key is intentionality. If you rest on purpose. If you act on purpose. Jealousy doesn't get to push you into either avoidance or overdrive. This idea connects everything you've learned so far. Distance reduces unnecessary triggers. Interpretation stops posts from becoming verdicts. Self-talk prevents self-attack. Values clarify direction. Pace regulates your system. And this step gives the energy somewhere to go. Together, they turn jealousy from a destabilizing force into a neutral signal you know how to handle. Later, when we put all of this under pressure in a real-life situation, this small redirection will be one of the key moves that keeps you from spiraling. You won't need to figure out what to do at the moment. You'll already know the question to ask and the scale of action that keeps you steady instead of overwhelmed. Section 8. The final core skill is about identity, not as a label, but as a posture you return to when comparison tries to pull you out of yourself. The instruction here is subtle but stabilizing. Stop asking, how do I look compared to them, and start asking, who am I being right now? If you don't make this shift, jealousy keeps finding new angles, because even when circumstances change, the habit of self-evaluation through others remains. Here's why this matters. Most comparison pain isn't about what you lack. It's about who you think you are when you see someone else succeeding. The moment jealousy hits, identity questions rush in. Am I competent enough? Am I doing life right? Am I falling behind as a person? Those questions feel urgent because they're existential. They're not really about money, relationships, or success. They're about worth and belonging. Social media quietly encourages identity by observation. You look outward to see who you should be. You absorb signals about what's admired, what's celebrated, what counts. Over time, you start performing instead of living. You chase versions of yourself that photograph well but don't necessarily feel right. A steadier version of you doesn't eliminate identity questions. They anchor them in behavior and character instead of outcomes. This works because identity grounded in behavior is resilient. Outcomes fluctuate. Visibility fluctuates. Praise fluctuates. But how you show up in ordinary moments is something you can return to again and again. When your sense of self is rooted there, comparison loses leverage. Other people's success stops feeling like a threat to who you are. The exact line you're going to use with yourself is this: I'm practicing being someone I respect. Say it slowly. This sentence shifts identity from status to practice. It reminds you that who you are is something you enact, not something you prove. Let's put this into a familiar situation. It's late afternoon and you're scrolling while waiting for something to finish. You see a string of posts that all seem to point in the same direction: people thriving, achieving, being admired. The old reaction starts to form. You think about how you appear by comparison. You wonder if you're impressive enough, interesting enough, and successful enough. Your mood dips because the question itself is destabilizing. Now imagine responding differently. You notice the comparison starting, and instead of asking how you stack up, you ask, who am I being right now? Are you being honest? Are you being patient? Are you being consistent? Are you being kind? Are you showing up for the things you said matter? You say to yourself, I'm practicing being someone I respect. The feed doesn't disappear, but it stops defining you. You're no longer auditioning against strangers. You're checking in with your own conduct. This matters because respect is internal before it's external. When you respect how you're living, you don't need constant reassurance. And when you don't respect how you're living, no amount of external validation really fixes that. Identity anchored in respect gives you a stable center. Your tiny action for today is reflective but concrete. At the end of the day, ask yourself one question: did I act in ways I respect today? Not perfectly. Not heroically. Just honestly. If the answer is mostly yes, let that be enough. If the answer is no, pick one small adjustment for tomorrow. This isn't about judgment. It's about alignment. Let's slow this down together. Take a breath in. Let it out slowly. Bring to mind one small action you took recently that you respect, even if no one else noticed it. Sit with that for a moment. Now say the sentence, "I'm practicing being someone I respect." Notice how that feels compared to asking whether you're ahead or behind. A common resistance here is the thought, "This sounds like lowering standards." It's not. It's clarifying them. Respect-based identity doesn't excuse complacency. It actually supports growth, because growth feels safer when it's not tied to constant self-judgment. You're more willing to try, fail, and adjust when your worth isn't on the line every time you see someone else succeed. Another resistance is the desire for certainty. Outcomes give quick feedback. Identity practice feels slower and less tangible. But that slowness is a feature, not a flaw. It keeps you grounded when outcomes are unpredictable. It allows you to stay steady in seasons where progress is invisible. Over time, this shift changes how jealousy shows up. Instead of thinking, "They're better than me," you think, "They're on their path, and I'm on mine." Not as a slogan, but as a lived orientation. You stop needing to rank yourself. You focus on inhabiting your life more fully. This also improves your relationships. When your identity isn't threatened by others' success, you can celebrate it without feeling diminished. You don't need to compete or withdraw. You can stay present. That's a sign of emotional maturity, not detachment. If you skip this step, the other tools still help, but something remains shaky. You can manage jealousy moment to moment, but the deeper question of "who am I?" keeps resurfacing through comparison. This practice answers that question in a way that's sustainable. At this point, you have all the core pieces. You know how to change the meaning of what you see. You know how to create distance and regulate pace. You know how to talk to yourself without turning emotions into attacks. You know how to redirect energy into your own lane. And now you have an identity posture that holds all of it together. In the next part, we're going to put these tools under real pressure. A situation where fatigue, timing, and emotion collide, and where comparison usually wins. You'll see how these practices work together in real time, not as theory, but as a live response. Section 9. It's Friday night, and the week has already taken more out of you than you expected. You're home earlier than planned, sitting on the couch with the lights low, phone in your hand, telling yourself you'll just unwind for a minute. There's a takeout container on the coffee table, half finished, the kind of meal you grab when you don't have the energy to cook but still want something warm. Your body feels heavy. Your mind feels oddly restless. You're tired, but not calm. You unlock your phone without much intention. No urgent messages. No real reason to be here. You open a social app almost automatically, like muscle memory. And then it happens. A post that lands harder than most. Not a celebrity. Not a stranger. Someone close enough that comparison feels personal. Someone who shares your age range, your background, your general lane. They're celebrating something you've wanted for a while now. A relationship milestone. A career step. A group of friends laughing somewhere that looks full and alive. The photo is warm. The caption is confident. The timing is terrible. You feel it immediately. A small drop in your stomach. A tightening across your chest. Your shoulders rise without you meaning to. And the thought forms, fast and familiar, "I should be further along by now." That sentence used to be the beginning of the end of your night. You know the old script well. Scroll more, as if more information might fix the feeling. Compare harder. Feel worse. Maybe start questioning your past decisions. Maybe feel embarrassed about your own life. Eventually go to bed late, tired but wired, replaying images that have nothing to do with what actually matters to you. You've been here enough times to recognize the pattern. And this time, something small but important interrupts it. Before the story fully runs away with you, you notice your body. That tightness. That shallow breathing. You pause. Not dramatically. Just long enough to take one slow breath in through your nose and let it out through your mouth. As you exhale, the sentence you practiced earlier surfaces almost on its own. This is their moment, not my measurement. You don't say it like a mantra. You say it like a reminder. The post doesn't disappear, but it stops feeling like a verdict on your worth. The jealousy is still there, but it's quieter now. It hasn't turned into self-attack. And because you're not attacking yourself, you can notice something else that's true. You're exhausted. It's late. This is exactly the time of day when your defenses are lowest. You remember the boundary you set for yourself about scrolling at night. Not now. Later, on purpose. You realize you didn't actually choose to be here. You just drifted. You lock your phone and place it face down on the table. There's a moment of discomfort. A tug to pick it back up. Your mind reaches for the familiar hit of distraction. You don't judge that urge. You sit with it. You take another slow breath. Your shoulders drop a fraction. The room feels quieter. Nothing in your life has been solved, but you've created a little space between yourself and the spiral. A few minutes pass. The initial sting fades into something more neutral. And then another question comes to mind, one you've been practicing. What's one small step in my lane? Not a big move. Not a life overhaul. Just one step. Tonight, the answer is modest. You've been meaning to outline something for next week. Nothing glamorous. Nothing that would make a good post. You open your laptop and write 3 rough bullet points. It takes 10 minutes. You don't feel inspired. You don't feel transformed. But you feel engaged. That small action does something important. The restless energy that was circling in your chest now has somewhere to go. You're no longer just watching other people live. You're participating in your own life again. The jealousy doesn't need to disappear completely for that shift to happen. It just needs to stop running the show. When you close the laptop, you notice something else. You're calmer. Not happy in a forced way. Just settled. You lean back on the couch and let your body relax. The post you saw earlier drifts through your mind again, but it feels distant now. Informational. Not personal. As you get ready for bed, the urge to check your phone comes back. Habit is persistent. You catch it. You slow it down. One breath. And this time, instead of asking how you compare, you ask a different question. Who am I being right now? You're being someone who noticed their limits. Someone who chose not to pile stimulation onto exhaustion. Someone who redirected energy instead of letting it turn inward. The sentence lands quietly. I'm practicing being someone I respect. That thought changes the tone of the night. You're not grading your life. You're acknowledging how you showed up in a hard moment. You didn't need to be perfect. You just needed to stay present. You lie down and notice how different your mind feels compared to other Friday nights like this. There's no loop of comparison playing on repeat. No silent argument about whether you're behind. No pressure to catch up before Monday. There's just the sense that you handled something well. That you stayed in your lane. That you didn't abandon yourself when it would have been easy to do so. The post from earlier doesn't feel important anymore. Not because it was meaningless, but because it no longer defines you. You fall asleep without replaying it. The weekend doesn't feel ruined or empty. It feels open. And that openness comes from a series of small, deliberate choices stacked together in a moment that used to knock you off balance. This is what responding looks like in real life. Not dramatic. Not heroic. Just grounded, repeatable decisions that protect your attention and your self-respect when comparison shows up uninvited. Section 10. What this episode was really about is learning how to respond instead of react when comparison shows up in your life. Not by pretending you don't feel anything, and not by trying to control what other people post or achieve, but by reclaiming control over your attention, your interpretations, and your pace. When you do that, your inner life stops being shaken every time someone else's feed looks better than your current moment. At the beginning, you stepped into a familiar experience, that quiet, late-night scroll where a single image can flip your mood and leave you feeling behind without you fully realizing why. You saw how quickly comparison sneaks in and how much it costs when it goes unchecked: lost focus, restless sleep, and subtle damage to your self-respect. Then you learn to separate other people's moments from your own measurement, so a highlight reel stops turning into a verdict about your life. After that, you practiced creating distance by choosing when you engage instead of letting unlimited access decide your emotional rhythm for you. From there, you change the way you speak to yourself when jealousy hits, so the feeling doesn't turn into an internal attack. You anchored yourself to personal markers that matter to you, not to whatever happens to be most visible online. You slowed your scrolling to the speed your nervous system can actually handle, so impressions don't pile up faster than your body can process them. You learned how to turn jealousy into a small step in your own lane instead of letting it circulate as frustration. Then you shifted identity away from how you look compared to others and toward who you're practicing being. Finally, you watched all of those tools come together in a real Friday night moment where comparison usually wins, and you saw how a few steady choices kept the spiral from taking over. The deeper lesson running through all of this is simple but powerful. Other people's lives are not instructions for yours. When you stop outsourcing your sense of progress to a feed designed to show extremes, you regain something most people don't even realize they've lost: a grounded sense of direction. You don't need to eliminate jealousy to live well. You need to know how to meet it, limit its authority, and move forward without letting it define you. This is the difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is automatic, fast, and draining. Responding is slower, intentional, and stabilizing. Reacting keeps you chasing or withdrawing. Responding keeps you present in your own life. Over time, that difference compounds. It changes how you make decisions, how you relate to others, and how you feel about yourself when no one is watching. To make this practical, here are 3 things to do today. First, choose one vulnerable time of day and make it a no-scroll window for the next week. It might be the first 30 minutes after waking up or the hour before bed. When the urge hits, use the sentence, "Not now. I'll check later," on purpose, and notice how your baseline mood shifts when you protect that time. Second, the next time you feel a sharp comparison, say, "This is their moment, not my measurement," and pause for one full breath before doing anything else. That pause is where control lives. Third, when jealousy lingers, ask yourself, what's one small step in my lane, and take the smallest reasonable version of that step within 24 hours. 5 minutes counts. One message counts. Consistency matters more than scale. As you practice these, pay attention to what changes quietly. You may not feel dramatic relief, but you'll notice fewer spirals. You'll notice that your evenings feel calmer. You'll notice that other people's success doesn't hijack your sense of self as easily. Those are signs that you're building emotional control the Stoic way, through steady habits, not heroic effort. If this lesson resonated, the next thing you'll want to watch is a focused session on handling external validation and criticism, where we go deeper into staying steady when praise and judgment both pull at your attention in work, relationships, and everyday conversations. It builds directly on what you practiced here and strengthens the same muscles from a different angle. If you want a whole library of Stoic Focus lessons on emotional control, boundaries, and relationships, this is what we do here every week. If you feel messages like this need to reach more people, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.